Okay, everybody, thank you very much once again for joining our webinar. My name is Zamach English, for those who have just joined us recently. As part of the panel of people presenting, I've also got Chris Mahoney. So he's our regional pre-sales technical engineer, also helping out across Australia, New Zealand, and across the ditch in Greater APAC. Then we've also got Janady Lores. I hope I got his last name right. He is a pre-sales technical engineer for UiPath. So we are going to be going through a couple of demos that are really relevant across all industries. What I wanted to do before we do that, though, is just mention there is going to be a Q&A at the end of the session. However, please feel free to raise any questions. And if it's not too technical or if it's actually part of the process, we'll dive a little bit deeper into it. I also want to mention as well that at the end, you're going to see some of my contact details. Feel free to reach out to me after the webinar. Alternatively, I'll reach out to yourselves and try and book in just a really short conversation to answer any questions you have. And most importantly, get some feedback about the process we show, because that is really important to us. And then finally, I also just want to clarify, as part of the processes, we have had to slow down the steps taken. We've also had to force validation on some of the documents so we can show you what it's like in a real life scenario. It's not that we haven't been able to extract the data. It's more we just want to be able to show you exactly what is involved in both a fully automated process, but also in terms of exception handling, which is obviously a large part of day-to-day enterprise business. So essentially with that said, what I want to do is just go straight into some of the dynamics about Episoft, UiPath, and what's happening in the market. So Episoft, I mean, for a lot of the people on the webinar, you're probably wondering who we are. Now, we believe in turning unstructured document chaos, structuring it and creating order and essentially making the data actionable and intelligent. So we do that to accelerate digital transformation, and not in the way of replacing anybody, but rather unlocking human potential so they're able to focus on work that really matters. Now, we've been around for over a decade, innovating in the document capture space, and we've got about 700 customers across 60 different countries. And that's because a lot of that has to do with the cloud deployment options across Azure, AWS, but more importantly, how easy it is to train new documents with drag and drop UI and a point and click extraction, just allowing you to get some incremental optimization as you continue to use the platform. Now, obviously, UiPath, a business that needs very little introduction, they focus and specialize in making automation easy. The reason why we partnered with them is because they do, their solution is one of the only ones that combines both back office and desktop automation out of the box. But they also integrate a lot of innovative thinking in terms of their robot management through Orchestrator. And they're a trusted company with over 60 government agencies using their digital workforce and thousands of commercial companies globally. But why are we holding this webinar? So if we look at enterprise, we look at the documents they're ingesting, there's an obvious issue in that 80 to 90% of data is unstructured. And that's just not me speaking, that's directly from Gartner. So what that means is it can't be easily accessed, it can't be searched, and it can't be used. So another challenge we're having with the market is in terms of the constantly changing regulation and compliance requirements. This actually creates a lot of variations in documents as enterprises grow and as complexity increases. So a roll on from that is what we like to call the 1-10-100 rule. It takes $1 to verify if data is correct, but if it gets into the system, and if you want to correct it at the point of ingestion, it's going to cost you $10. Now, if no action is taken and it enters into your enterprise backend application, it could take up to $100 to rectify the situation, or even in terms of fines for something that could have been solved a little bit earlier. And that's becoming more prevalent because the average organization has more than 40 customer forms. I know a lot of consultancy firms are on this conversation. If you're working with banks, and we've got a couple of of them on here as well. I had a look at a local bank here recently, and I saw up to 57 different products available to customers. Now that means that some poor, well not poor, some unfortunate worker within the enterprise is going to have to look at 57 different types of forms, identify them, and then pass them on to the correct team. Now that is something that obviously, when automated, not only improves the process but also lowers the amount of errors and risk to the business. So, what's the solution? Well, unfortunately, Oprah Winfrey is not going to help us out here, but a lot of institutions are actually looking at a one-to-one relationship between intelligent workers and their digital support or their digital assistants to help them optimize their day-to-day processes. Now, as part of what you're going to see, and what I wanted to help a lot of the people on this webinar achieve is helping them identify opportunities within their organization for incremental automation. So there are 4 key areas, and sorry for the delay there, but there are 4 key areas. So the first one being high volume document flow. Now, whether these documents are physical, being in a mailroom, or digital, areas of high document flow are always excellent targets for automation. They're an easy win or a quick win. The second is manual data entry. Now, anywhere in the organization where document data is manually entered into a system of record or a document repository is a prime target. Even the smallest of opportunities can have a massive impact when spread out throughout multiple departments. So take the administrator who spends an hour every day keying in information from email attachments. If that is being done by 5, 10, or 20 workers in an organization, the hours and inefficiency add up. Now, the other 2, manual sorting and splitting. Sorting and splitting documents is a massive time waster. Take, for example, a PDF that houses 3, maybe more documents. The time and effort to split, save, and rename even low volume can consume precious hours. And a lot of our banking, finance, insurance customers, you're really going to resonate with the last one, or even in HR, is the data document verification. So as documents and their associated data flow in, it can take specialized workers to ensure proper data and validate that it's correct. Errors that pass through to end systems can be very costly, not only in terms of that rectification that we spoke about, but also in terms of compliance and increasing regulation. So what we're going to show you today is 2 really simple processes. And the reason why we've got these two processes is because each business has their own challenge. Some want to improve a process, and some want to automate a process end to end. So just briefly before I hand over to the Brains Trust, which is Janady and Chris, I just want to give you a quick walkthrough that we're going to take an unstructured document. We're effectively, through Episoft, going to classify and extract the data. Now, this is where the force validation of extracted data comes in, because we're going to show you the UI and how it can be rectified, or if there are any changes. And then post that, we're going to use our AI and supervised machine learning to structure the data for it to be deposited in SharePoint, where a team member is actually going to be notified via email through UiPath's Studio. And essentially that document is then processed. Now, this can fit into any process. This could be at the beginning, in the middle, at the end, and then finally, we're going to go into a fully automated end-to-end processing of a document. So very similar. However, there's going to be no human intervention whatsoever. And this is for your high volume areas in the business. So we're going to grab the document. It's completely unstructured by UiPath. It's going to be handed over to Episoft Transact. Once again, we're going to bring in that AI and supervised machine learning, first to classify and then extract based on the business rules that we've set with that document. The metadata is going to be structured and for UiPath to initiate a processing of that application. And then the data is actually going to be automated, or the data entry is going to be automated, and an email confirmation will be sent to let a manager know that that's been complete. So with that said, let's move straight into the demonstration.
Okay, thank you very much, Mage. You did a very good job of really pointing out what we're going to be showing today. To go into a little bit more detail, as recently we've been working with our friends over at UiPath. So Junaidi and myself have been going through a range of different processes that we'd like to show you today. So as Amici mentioned, one of those processes was process improvement. The other was a fully automated process, essentially where you take your hands off the steering wheel and you let the system drive. So a little bit about Episoft. So completely web-based product. Very, very easy to classify documents, add new documents, and also very easy to configure to extract metadata. And you'll definitely get to see a little bit of that today. The choice of form that we're working with today, and this is completely made up, but it's a direct debit request. So the way that this particular form enters an organization is via email. We're actually just going to capture from a desktop today. So you can see here that there are a range of different fields on this particular form. One of the nice features is we're actually doing a little bit of signature detection just to see if the signature is present. And we're capturing all the relevant metadata such as the first and surname, a range of account numbers and amounts. So I'll jump into that right now. So essentially what you'll see is when I initiate the UiPath workflow. So you're actually seeing here that it will request the files to be uploaded. And Junaidi, if you want to jump in and add to this, feel free.
Sure. So the input to this batch currently is basically just pick a file, but you can replace that with, say, reading from an inbox and downloading the attachment, or monitoring a folder where when a file is dropped, pick it up and process it similarly. But for the purpose of this demo, I guess the bot's just asking for a folder where the file will be processed. So at this stage, the bot's passing the document to Episoft, and Episoft is basically going through its workflow, and it's basically currently hitting the waiting for validation stage. And because of what the bot's currently looking at here is the force validation that's been set within Episoft Transact, and that is basically the detection of whether a signature is present. Now, because it's waiting for a person to validate, the bot now essentially throws a Google Chrome page and the particular URL and particular PDF that we have just uploaded, and is waiting for a human to process this document.
Yeah, so as you can see, this is our validation client, and you can see all the corresponding information that is being extracted. One of the very nice features is you may have separate teams that process different parts of this specific document. So you may have a team that's checking, say, the signature, for instance. Now, an organization could receive a form like this up to 500 times a week. So you can imagine how many times someone is having to process these types of forms and how many touch points or people that particular document is going through. So with this, you can actually see that there is a range of different checks. And again, you can see the OCR is actually quite accurate. But if for any reason there was a specific problem with the BSB, you have the ability to do click functionality where you can select different parts or elements on the page. But also too, you can right click and highlight that and make a correction on the fly. So it gives you the ability to correct the data and ensure that you have data integrity going into further down the process. The very nice part is we can see here that the signature is true, like so, and that shows down the bottom here, like so. So from here, once a person is validated, essentially within the back end, it will move across the team will be notified that that specific document is then ready to be processed further down the track. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to validate that now. And excellent. So what I intend to see is an email, and you will see that down the bottom here, like so, as it's bringing up the messaging.
Correct. So in the background, again, the bot is checking the status of the batch that's being processed by Episoft Transact. And once the data is validated, it's going to move on. And once it's finished, it's going to complete processing by basically sending an email to, say, a supervisor or someone who's notifying them that the document is ready. Cool. So the bot has just finished. You've seen a very quick one that says validation is finished, sending email summary. So Chris, you should have an email in your inbox from the UiPath bot now.
Yes, and I can see that that's actually just arrived. So I'll go ahead and I'll open that up and drag it across to my other screen. So you can see a record of that. So you can see it 12:51. I've received an email. It states that there's a new direct debit request. Now this could essentially go to one person. It could go to a team, and that's similarly with the validation as well. That validation could open in the same office. It could open in an office in Melbourne. It could open in an office overseas. There's no real limitation on where the validation client can reside. The very nice part is the particular request could go to one person. It could go to a specific team. There is no real limitations in that regard. Now, if I go ahead and open that up, as you can see here, the document has successfully been moved into SharePoint. Sorry, my apologies. You can see the document has been moved into SharePoint successfully, and the corresponding metadata has also been sent down alongside that document. And that essentially sort of concludes the process improvement demonstration. One of the nice things I would like to add, and it goes back to the earlier point of organizations having multiple documents, so multiple application forms, and all different types of documentation that may flow in and out of the organization that may require a wet signature or something similar. The very nice part is it's made rather simple with Episoft Transact. So if I was to go to my batch class management, I can open up that specific batch class, and you could see that there's a direct debit request form that I put in earlier. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another document. And in this case, we're going to say a bank statement. Okay, great. So I'm just going to update that specific document type, and I'm going to press apply to that. Now that's completely empty. But the nice part is I've actually got a bogus bank statement here. So you can see this wonderful bank statement. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to classify that, and you'll get to see some of the machine learning capability. So if I select bank statement, I can upload a learn file like so. I can press other. And you can actually see here that a little bit of machine learning is taking place. So it's learning that specific bank statement. Now, a lot of bank statements do follow a very similar format. So, I mean, a recommendation would be to put a couple of different types of bank statements in there, just for the machine to learn the different sort of formats of bank statements. The very nice part is that now, if I introduce that into that same process, and by taking that and putting that into the finance folder, so you can see that I have the same direct debit form that I showed earlier, as well as that particular bank statement. I'm hoping that it will actually stop in my validation client and show both documents ready to be validated. And that doesn't necessarily need to be validated every time, but for the nature of the demo, we've just sort of included it. So what I'll do, I'll kick that particular process off again. We'll select our, sorry, my apologies. I'll select the two documents, and essentially the same process is being run again. And we should see now two different document types within the validation client, and that's the classification taken care of. Excellent. So you can see the same direct debit request form appears, but we also have the bank statement in there as well. Now, the very nice part is that, and Junaid, you'd probably add to this, the two different document types could be handled completely different. So the processes within the background could go to completely separate teams or different areas within the organization. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So once, say, the output of these documents, the metadata extracted from each of the different document type is processed and transferred back from Transact to UiPath, we can definitely push this information to different applications, different teams, and so on and so forth.
Very nice. Excellent. So look, that sort of concludes the process improvement demonstration. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to validate that now. And that will essentially follow the same process where it will move the documents to the corresponding team. The bank statement, because we haven't built that out, that will sort of lay dormant at this point. But we could definitely sort of build on that in the future. We could have up to 50, 100 document types in there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we'll just let that sort of finish. And actually, I might let, if you want to drive the next one today.
So actually, I'll probably touch a little bit on the UiPath components itself.
Yeah.
So the bot that we just executed is pretty straightforward. It says pick a folder, throw in the upload batch process, and then finally send an email down here. But there's quite a bit of a logic built into this upload batch because it's basically throwing this batch files, a batch of files into Microsoft Transact, but there's a logic to check the status of each of these status, whether it's waiting for review, waiting for validation, whether it's finished, whether it's pending, and each of these workflows can be built into the UiPath robots here. And if accidentally somebody closes the review for validation, it means it's still waiting for validation. The UiPath bot can again send an additional email, say if it hasn't been validated for 15 minutes, send it to a different person or a different group of people. You know, things like that can be built into the robot quite easily. So with that, I think we can move on to the next demo.
Absolutely. So the next demo falls on to process automation. We've taken a very simple use case, which is invoices. That's one that always seems to come up a fair amount. I'd like to show you sort of the sample set that we're working with. So we have a range of different invoices. We have interesting things. So we're capturing things like the invoice date, number, total amount, but we're also capturing line items. And some of these invoices contain sort of very relevant information in regards to line items. This particular invoice here contains 6 different invoices in the one document. So with Transact, we actually have very strong separation capability where it will separate the 6 different documents out and read each one individually, and then extract the relevant metadata accordingly and move that into the back-end application. The nice part is, and Junaid did a great job of building this. So look, we have you would call it a faux invoice system where a particular operator may need to have 2 screens. They would sit in front of this particular application, looking at the invoice and looking where the metadata resides on the page, and then having to manually enter that in every time. So they may look at an invoice and say, okay, that's the first part, and the second part, and enter in totals and whatever that may be. Now that's a very time-consuming job. but also too, it's a very repetitive, monotonous job.
Not to mention error prone.
Very error prone. And look, that particular employee doing this could be freed up and they could do more meaningful work within the organization. So the very nice part is we're going to automatically, with UiPath and both Transact, utilize our APIs and pass that information back to UiPath. And I'll definitely let Janady explain a little bit more on that. And it's essentially just taking your hands off the steering wheel and letting the system take care of it.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Chris. So basically with the second demo that we're doing here, it's a much simpler one, because what we're doing is basically as an input, again, we're just going to pick a folder, but as mentioned earlier, that can come from many different sources, be it an inbox, downloading the attachment that could be like, say, up to 100 different documents at a time, watching a folder and so on. And then what it's going to do is extract all the fields, in this case, invoice number, invoice date, total amount, GST, and that sort of things, as well as the line items. And then it's going to enter all this information into the application in the invoice system. And at the end of the day, again, just sending an email summary to notify the supervisor that, hey, I've created 5, 10, 15 different invoices, and maybe this is some information. So I'm just going to kick this off now. Let's just close all the details. So again, just giving a folder, and that's the ANZ demo folder with the 3 different invoices. So at this stage, it's basically just, again, similarly throwing this information or the files to Transact and extracting the fields and the line items or the tables information. Once it's done that, it's going to open the application. It could be your HR application, it could be Salesforce, it could be SAP. In our demo here, it's just a dummy invoice application that it's going to launch and start punching in these details.
And it all actually happens rather quickly. So here it goes.
So these are one invoice at a time that's being entered. And I think we have about 5 to 8 different invoices, and it's done. So the part that took probably the longest was probably extracting all the information. Once it's got it, the robot can be pretty quick in terms of typing and entering the data without any errors. Absolutely,
absolutely. And the very nice part is, and I've just received an email very quickly, and you can see that all happened very quickly. And again, that could be, we've triggered that by selecting a folder, but that could be coming from a number of different sources. So it could be an email, it could be a range of different sources where that information is coming from and those invoices are coming from. And as you can see here, I've just received an email and it's stating that the invoice numbers, the following invoice numbers have been created in the invoice system. Now, essentially that concludes pretty much the automation demonstration. And Janady, I don't know if you want to just touch on some of the points of UiPath here.
So yeah, sure. Probably touch 2 things. One is a list of different connection that we have with Episoft. So within UiPath, we can easily integrate with Episoft with some of these activities, which is basically the activities that we use in the demo here. Connecting to Transact, uploading the badge, or just extracting information. So those are available out of the box that can be easily used. Once Transact is set up with the batch classes, we can easily just throw files at it and then see what's the information extracted, the confidence level, and so on. Now, secondly, as you see, the start and the end of the process is basically like the leg and the arms of a robot, and all the engines behind it is sitting in UiPath, which is like the brain, if you will. So once we get our information, we throw it to Transact to process. Once it's returned something, again, UiPath can carry out the rest of the job that's required.
Excellent. So look, that concludes our demonstrations.
So that was absolutely perfect. Just bear with us one moment while Chris brings up my slides. Fantastic. So just to wrap up what you saw, essentially it was a combination of intelligent or smart document capture software. It features AI-based supervised machine learning technology, which classifies, extracts, and exports metadata to provide a clear and undistorted vision for the robotic or digital worker. Now, what you're seeing here are some real metrics from our customers that quantify some of the value they're realizing from using Episoft. They come from our case studies, and I'm more than happy to share them with you, but particularly where we've seen in finance around the Royal Commission, but also, as you probably all know, changes in interest rates, is productivity is key. And so that 400% productivity came purely from the classification engine alone. Now that was through Mountain West Financial over in the US, a credit union that was looking for a solution that could help separate the mountains of documents that they were getting in a single PDF. Now, another one that we're seeing as well is in terms of processing time, because customer experience, internal experience is so important as a competitive edge. Real-time decision-making can really make or break whether a company is moving in the right or the wrong direction, making the right or the wrong decision in terms of the outcome for their executives, their customers, or their staff. And so we were able to reduce their processing time by between 50 and 80% by removing the need for a human to make a decision on where a document should be sent to for processing, and then taking it one step further and doing the processing for them. So we could leave the decision to somebody who was intelligent, had the ability to make a subjective or an objective decision based on the information that was in front of them, rather than having to key it in first and then make the decision afterwards.